so excited about this show today. We got an interview from Texas.
That's all you care about. Jimmy Song, man.
Jimmy Song coming on. We're going to talk Bitcoin.
Oh, man.
Yes, we are.
You're going to go to school.
We got 2 segments on Bitcoin.
Go to school.
Yeah. Like Bitcoin school.
Yeah, you got to eat your protein bar and your milkshake and your brain food.
Yeah, Pastor Toby Chalk Knox on the Water Boy. It's good to be with you guys on
nice
this
shirt,
Sunday
Dave.
special.
Very nice
you
shirt.
guys check out this shirt. No, I'm just gonna hop right to it. Look at this. I got the logo up on the screen right behind us.
Nice.
Oh, look, we match.
I love
Yeah.
the color.
The American flag.
It actually colored
You've been
the
wanting
American
that for a
flag.
while.
Exactly. I've been wanting that for a while and everything. But
Love
this
God.
is,
Sing Psalm to fight
this
tyrants.
is our T-shirt for our rowdy conference. Our rowdy conference.
Our rowdy rally.
Our rowdy rally in South Dakota. So we hope you guys sign up. We want to see you there.
April 29, 30, May 1st. Go to flfnetwork.com/register.
We should have more information coming out next couple weeks
Or is
about
it rally?
hotels.
Is
Yeah,
it rally?
/rally.
/rally.
With Christian conferences canceling this whole year, you might as well just come on out. You know?
Might as well.
Ain't
And you
nobody-
ain't having our ZIM 50 from Together for the Gospel this year, so that ain't
Hey, Chuck
that ain't
Knox.
happening.
Yes, sir.
What you think about Ravi?
Okay, so since you're gonna do this, since you're gonna bring this up, I wasn't gonna say nothing. I was gonna leave it alone.
Yeah,
but
I know you was.
Since you're gonna bring it up, it's funny to me. So I've been around for a little bit and back in groups and conferences and people.
You ever
doing
done a
things.
conference with Ravi?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah?
And it's funny because I remember the ground that people used to worship that Ravi walked on.
Oh, yeah? Ooh.
And it's interesting to me that all these people now that are saying something,
Yeah.
they wasn't saying nothing back then.
Yeah.
Everybody sees warning signs now.
Oh, yeah.
But they didn't see warning signs.
They're all
then.
seeing warning signs?
And now everybody's doing this Christian kind of a virtue signaling to say, we knew it.
Creeping back?
Yeah. And it's like, hold on, man. If Riley was alive 5 years ago, y'all wouldn't be saying nothing then. Don't say nothing now all of a sudden.
If you brought him lemonade on a pedestal, you were hating him.
Right.
You were
Right.
If you treated him like you walked on air, you were not loving that brother.
Why not just come out and say and repent? You know what? I think I respect a lot more. You know what? We should have saw that. We didn't.
Yeah.
But right now everybody's positioned to act like we knew.
It's easy to hang a dead man.
Let me tell you something else.
It's easy to hang a dead man.
They impeached him.
Yeah, they did.
That's funny.
They took away his pastoral
That's
credentials
funny.
Now that
from his denomination.
he's out of office.
They impeached him.
The other thing is, I'm seeing all these people pop up and say, I never really was a fan of Ravi.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, y'all wasn't talking like that a moment ago.
Yeah, you
Everybody
allowed
was seeing
to
it, and
now.
it's like, you know what? There's sins there. Okay, but don't act like all of a sudden like you would like this 4 or 5 years ago because you wasn't.
We
So just-
weren't going to bring
just
this. Yeah,
hush.
exactly. We weren't going to bring this
I
up.
don't even-
We weren't going to bring this up on the show.
You see what I did?
But you got
see
him
what I
going.
did?
You got him going. But here's the thing: is like the board repents, but we don't know anybody's name on the board.
No.
You're done. You're fired. Get out of here.
Zacharias, all these things started coming out a couple years ago.
Why you do this to me?
And then, my noise went out. My earplug.
Oh, that's my bad. You got to hit the table.
And then he comes, and then he dies,
Yeah.
and then they do they hire an outside firm. It's like it's easy to hang a dead man. There's no boldness or courage in all this,
Right.
And everything. Let's get away from this.
There's so much to.
You guys got to sign up for our Fight Laugh Feast magazine.
Oh, yeah.
This issue
Oh,
coming
look at
out
that.
is laughter.
That is beast.
And
I
also
love that.
That
joy
is
and strength.
beast.
That's the cover.
And I love that
the cover.
combination. That lion is laughing,
Yeah.
but that's scary laughter.
That is.
That's a laugh.
That's a laugh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't.
You ever
Have you seen a lion laugh?
You ever seen Aslan laugh? Yeah, it's scary.
No, I haven't actually.
Yeah.
Make sure you guys are checking out deftwire.com, DEFTwire.com. That's our news aggregator. We all share news on that website. So we want this to be just a fun, nice way to get good news. And it's in the app.
I was going to say that.
Easily pull it up in the app.
Don't forget Mark Dewey in the bullpen. The only way to get that podcast, and that guy is on fire, is in the app, in the bullpen with Mark Dewey.
Yeah.
Check it out. It's like baseball and worldview and manhood.
And he's just a good host. He is good. I mean, it's amazing. Listen to Mark Dewey. It's so many times we talk about, oh man, Christians need to do better in their art. Christians need to do better what they produce.
And he's doing
Mark Dewey is at the top of the game. I'll put him up there with any ESPN guy talking baseball. The dude is at the level, and I don't even like baseball, but I love listening to Mark Dewey.
This show is brought to you by Samaritan Ministries. It connects hundreds of thousands of Christians all over the nation who care for one another's medical needs, all without the use of insurance. This show is
Samaritan Ministries it's like the new Bitcoin.
It's like the Bitcoin of healthcare. I was going to say that.
Oh man, I beat you to it.
Hey, are you going to go to South Dakota in April?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'll be there too. Here's how it works. First, there are no network restrictions. You can use whatever medical care you want, whatever doctor you want. All you do is you send in your need.
Yeah.
And there's other Christians on the other side that say, hey, I'll send you, I'll take care of that for you.
Like Christians do.
And we've been doing that for a while. You can join anytime. New members are always welcome. When the body of Christ comes together to pray, encourage, and provide for one another, burdens are lifted. God is glorified. This applies to all areas of life, including healthcare. Learn more at SamaritanMinistries.org/crosspolitic.
Tell them we sent you.
Yeah.
Please.
Tell them we sent you. They're a great corporate sponsor. We love them. We love what they're doing. Tell them
we believe in it.
Sent you. When are we going to get out of this pandemic? I think we should ask, actually, Joe Biden when we're going to get.
No.
Should we?
No.
Ask Joe Biden? No.
He's the president.
All right.
By next Christmas, I think we'll be in a very different circumstance, God willing, than we are today.
Which God?
I think a year from now, when it's 22 below zero here, a year from now,
global warming.
I think that there'll be significantly fewer people.
It's a slow God. This God works slow.
Be socially distanced, have to wear masks, etc. But we don't know.
We don't know.
So I don't want to promise anything here. I told you when I ran and when I got elected, I will always level with you. To use Franklin Roosevelt's example, I'll shoot you, give it straight from the shoulder.
I will shoot
straight from the shoulder what I know and what I don't know.
I will shoot you.
We don't know for certain, but it is highly unlikely that by the beginning of next year's traditional school year in September, we are not significantly better off than we are today. But it matters. It matters whether you continue to wear that mask. It matters whether you continue to socially distance. It matters whether you wash your hands with hot water.
No, it doesn't.
Those things matter. They matter. And that can save a lot of lives while we're getting to this point where we get to herd immunity.
Two things here. One is, this is how petty tyranny likes to lead, is in the ambiguity and in the grayness. Like, are we going to get out? I don't know. How long is the pandemic going to go? I don't know.
But it's still condescending and badgering.
Absolutely.
But you still have to do what I say to do.
But you know where he got this leadership from? I can't tell you how many pastors I've talked to that like to, that when he starts talking about same scriptures. Yeah. Oh, it's gray.
Right, but listen to me.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I think you guys owe Uncle Daddy an apology.
No.
You guys, the whole time.
What?
Your Uncle Daddy was talking, and you guys were talking over Uncle Daddy. And he was trying to tell. No, wait a second now. Let Uncle Daddy tell y'all what y'all need to be doing with your lives.
I can't believe the President of the United States told me to wash my hands. All right. But you know what I'm saying?
But that's what I'm trying to get to. Why are we asking him when we can do and act like free human beings?
Right.
Uncle Daddy don't get to determine for us these things, and and so that's when do we get back to normal? Right. When can I go outside?
It's none of his business.
It doesn't matter what he says.
Right.
He's supposed to punish evil and reward good.
Well, this is all bound up with the everybody's been freaking out about Ted Cruz going to Cancun.
Yeah,
boy. Senator, did you hear the news brief that I did it today?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't catch it.
You should hear it.
Who cares what Ted Cruz is doing on his vacation?
Well, here's the thing. So
leave the.
I know.
He's
Come
a
on,
senator.
Pastor.
He's a senator.
Preach it.
He doesn't run the Texas power grid.
Even if he wasn't, though, let's say that he's the governor for a second. Okay,
it's none of the governor's business.
So FEMA just got orders from Joe Biden to go to Oklahoma. I believe they're working on Louisiana and also trying to communicate with Texas so that they can supply. And Joe Biden is doing this, and he can be wherever he wants to be at, and it still operates. How come nobody's saying, "Well, Joe Biden's not in Texas.
Right.
Joe Biden's not in Louisiana. Joe Biden's not in Oklahoma"?
Because they hate Ted Cruz.
So that's the thing.
It doesn't. It's just a punching bag.
Why does it matter where your politician is?
Right. Well, why doesn't somebody ask, why is California still in lockdown while Florida is still open and free?
I want to start with what we just saw. Contrast states like Florida and California.
That's my question.
California basically in lockdown, and their numbers aren't that different from Florida.
Well, good morning, Stephanie. Look, there's so much of this virus that we think we understand, that we think we can predict, that's just a little bit beyond our explanation. What we do know is that the more careful people are, the more they mask and social distance.
No, Florida and California.
the quicker it goes away and the less it spreads. But we have got to get better visibility into variants. We don't know what role they play, large events, etc. But this is as we all have learned by this time, this is a virus that continues to surprise us. It's very hard to predict, and all around the country, we've got to continue to do a better job. And I think we are, but we're not done yet.
He just did the same thing. We don't know how this works, but what we do know is you got to wash your hands and put your mask on and do your thing.
Yeah.
This virus,
No.
it's really tricky.
Yeah, it is.
Well, here, I got a great
It's so
article.
tricky. It's so tricky that in Florida,
Yeah.
the variants don't go. They like go right up to the border and they're like, oh, this is Florida. We should go back to California.
Yeah.
But what she's really asking is the people in Florida are living like they're normal.
Free.
They're doing everything that they want to do. Their businesses are open. They're not losing the money. They're not shutting down. People's grandmothers and families are being able to see each other and manage and take care of each other. And people in California have all their freedoms taken away.
Yeah.
And so she's actually, it's funny because I don't think they would have asked this question a few months ago
sure.
when we didn't have
this is on MSNBC.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's a pretty big deal that she's even asking the question.
But I think there's another underlying question here, which is, what are you going to do about Florida, too?
Right. They aren't locked down.
Wait a
and
second.
they're doing all right.
They're being free.
Who gets to control what? That's like the kids saying, "Hey, how come they get to do?
Right.
What are y'all going to do about Florida?" And so Florida right now, y'all keep it up. I mean, I wish I would have never shut down, but
Right. So I got some helpful tips from a pastor, or actually Chris Hume. He's a Christian author on 6 reasons every pastor should require mask and social distancing in church.
I don't like this.
Oh no!
So,
In church?
In church.
Require mask and
hear 'em.
social distancing
Okay.
at
Okay.
church. Okay,
Okay.
at church.
Okay.
The first one is
I'm gonna be open-minded.
The first one is you'll be fitting in.
Yeah.
So
that's one of the fruit of the spirit.
and helping others to fit in too. So that's reason number one
To fit
by
in.
Chris. Yeah, to fit
That's
in.
what Jesus said. Make sure above everything else you fit in.
Number two, you will encourage everyone to trust the government. That's
Yeah.
Is that a good?
Yeah, that's Romans 13.
Is,
Romans 13.
okay,
Everybody
this
should
is-
trust the government, whatever it says.
Is that a taste
Maybe
of
this is satire. Now that
I'm tasting a little bit of sarcasm.
Okay, here we go.
Sarcasm. Number 3, by binding the consciences of all believers, you will weed out dangerous independent thinkers from your church.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's true.
That's what Paul said about schismatics.
That's so good. Number four, you will be showing your support for the government mandate shutdown of your congregants' businesses.
That's great.
Oh, this is definitely sarcasm, guys. This is
I'm not sure.
The more I read, I think it's more sarcasm.
Okay. Is there another one?
And Bitcoin, it's like all of a sudden I'm like, hey, this is where you need Bitcoin, right? Number 5, you will help Christians understand true science.
Which amounts to shut up.
yeah.
Exactly. Wash your or wash your hands.
Wash your hands and
from the
shut
president.
up.
The president said, "Wash your hands." Last one, number 6, Chris. I don't think this is actually helpful to the church. Now that now that I've read through them all. Number 6, you will ensure unity by making everyone act the same way.
Right, which is one of the
Compliance.
which is one of the fundamental values of critical race theory.
Oh,
Right? Ensuring unity by making everyone act the same way. Isn't that right?
Wow.
It's one of the fundamental values of critical.
Wow.
On the Gospel Coalition, I'm pretty sure I saw an article about it.
You know what's amazing to me is that
was it by RZIM?
Oh, Gabe,
Was it?
why are you bringing this back? You know it's funny. I don't think that people understand. How's our pastor coach? You talked to his lawyer the other day.
I'd love to give an update on this guy before we go off into our second segment here. But Pastor James Coates, I actually interviewed his lawyer yesterday
Yeah, how'd that go?
on my water break. It was really good.
Yeah.
Canadian law, it's not as shored up as our U.S. Constitution, even though our U.S. Constitution is not being shored up.
We don't
either.
care about the
We got
Constitution.
the First Amendment. We're like,
it can be interpreted, right? It's a living document. And so it's a little more difficult. So Canadian law basically says you have religious liberties unless there's emergencies or situations where the government needs to.
It's like America.
Revoke them for the greater good.
functionally the same.
So, but Canadian law specifically states that our Constitution doesn't, and it still happens, right?
Right. Ours actually states that we have that right, period.
Without an exception.
Without
The
exceptions.
Canadian law has an exception in there. So
basically, our city council and our government is more Canadian than America.
Bars.
Wow. That's
Bars.
tweetable. And so he's in jail now. He's
Still in jail.
been in jail since Tuesday. He had a hearing on Wednesday morning. In the hearing on Wednesday morning, the judge. So he's also on my show yesterday. The lawyer said this, but he's in jail on a non-arrestable offense.
Yeah.
So breaking the health code the way he did, he shouldn't be arrested, but he keeps doing it, and so the Canadians are trying to deal with him.
So they're putting teeth to it,
and they keep on asking him to promise that he won't go back and preach again in church.
That's what the judge gave him that
option,
not option, but that requirement related to
for
his
release.
Is it just preaching or preaching with a certain amount of people?
It's having more than 30%,
15%
capacity in the building.
Yeah.
So you can go back and preach, but with the regulations that the government say that you have to have in order to be able to preach.
It's like Pharaoh says, you can go out and worship in the wilderness, but you got to
bring your children.
You got to leave the women and children here.
So it's like you can pray, Daniel, but make sure that you close the windows.
Close the blinds.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah. And
all right.
Isn't that what Romans 13 says?
So
notice, guys, that they're saying the reason why they're keeping him is because they're saying he might be a health threat.
The inspector was quoted saying that he might be a threat.
He might
to Edmonton.
He might. So they haven't proved.
Yeah.
So
guys,
this goes back to preventative and punitive enforcement that we've been talking about here on the show.
This is the end of that road.
Yeah.
This is Jonathan Leeman's wisdom.
Yeah, right. If you allow the government to say we are going to prevent evil from happening, you give them that license to do that, to go around and inspect your buildings and inspect and see what's safe or what's healthy or whatever. The end of this, I mean, you can have reasonable people that are still working sort of with Christian standards where they'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
But as soon as that fades away, there's no end. There's no brakes on this car.
Yeah.
I interrupted you. Sorry.
No. So basically, they're kind of in this. They're waiting on a trial, and right now they can't quite schedule it yet. So he can be in jail for two weeks.
Jay,
or so.
Before we go, there have been a few websites that are trying to.
That's what I'm getting to right now.
Oh,
yeah, that's what I'm getting to.
Let's do that segue now.
Right. So there's a couple things that are going on that you guys can maybe help with. One is if you guys got some cash, donate to JCCF.ca. That's the Justice Center. That's who's defending Pastor Coates. And the guy that I talked to yesterday is a fantastic Christian.
Say that site again.
JCCF.ca.
Okay.
It's the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom in Canada.
Okay.
And they're great. They're great
defending Pastor Coates.
Yep. And the other thing is you can actually go to Grace Life and donate on their website to their church. Basically,
GraceLife.ca.
I think it's gracelife.ca.
That's the church. That's Pastor Coates.
Google Jason
church.
Coates, his website, his church website.
Grace Life.
Yeah, they had a GoFundMe campaign, raise what they needed initially, but I mean, this is going to be an ongoing
be a big fight.
It's going to be a big fight. His wife is home with 3 kids.
Pray for
a couple
them.
kids. She texted me kind of some updates on what's going on. So I talking to the lawyer yesterday, James Coates is a little discouraged just because he's by himself. You're eating prison food and all that stuff. So any encouragement you guys can bring them would be fantastic. Lastly, there's going to be a protest in Edmonton on the 20th, which is Saturday, which would be yesterday.
Yeah.
So kind of be praying for what happened there. And then there's one.
You can pray. You can definitely pray that way. You can pray that God would have blessed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
totally good.
And pay attention. There's some pastors that are starting to organize. There's one in Manitoba, and there's actually going on in Alberta, in Calgary.
Go to backtochurchmb.com.
Back to Church MB.
And this is for churches, particularly in Manitoba. Right. They're all planning to go back to church on March 7th. And they're saying basically everybody sign up, tell Manitoba, we're going back to church, no regulations, doors are open. And
this is what should happen in Alberta right now. You guys need to open up a website, do the same thing, same play they run in Manitoba, and thousands of Christians worship. Let's say March 7th. Let's all do March 7th.
Whatever.
Get your church prepared, get your sheep ready.
They can't
and do
arrest you
they
all.
Can't.
They can't arrest you all. They need to be done. And the church needs to just stand up. The church is open. Jesus Christ is Lord of the church. Right?
Amen.
Look, if they tried to put all those pastors in one jail cell, they got trouble on their hands.
Well, now we just gather together everybody to have church.
That's right.
So we're going to win anyway. Also, I want to say,
if you're in America and you're not meeting for worship, you are the problem.
Yeah.
You are the problem.
I don't think I can't stress this enough. People don't know this, but just hitting the share button, just posting this to your Twitter, to your Facebook, to your Gab, going around and sharing this and talking about this is a massive help and a massive blessing. And we don't understand. Don't just scroll past the story. Hit the share button, and believe it or not, that is extremely helpful and extremely powerful. And pray for our brother right now.
Pastor Coates.
Pastor Coates. He's in there fighting. We need to be out here fighting with him. All right.
Ready? You ready?
Get your pen and paper out. Get ready.
Bitcoin.
We're about to talk about Bitcoin. Share the show because you're going to want to understand this. This is powerful.
Do some push-ups.
Jimmy Song up next talking about Bitcoin on Cross Politic.
My name is Jamie Piles. I joined Samaritan in December of 1996, so I'm coming up on 24 years. When people ask me, does it really work? I say, oh, it works fantastic. I send my money to somebody every month. But we had a need with my wife. Spent a little bit of time in the hospital about 3 months ago, and so I had a checklist with about 39 names on it, and 39 checks came in. Some of the cards, some of the things people had to say, it was amazing to watch.
I had to do it.
It's because the cowboy hat,
right.
isn't it?
Oh, man. He's just encouraging you, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Welcome back to Cross Politic on the one and only Fight Laugh Feast Network. Thanks for joining us.
I'm pretty sure we're the fastest growing Christian political podcast ever.
That people are listening to right now.
Yeah, right now. Maybe. Maybe not.
And
maybe Bitcoin terminology.
in blockchain world.
Yeah.
Hey, with us right now on the line, we got Mr. Jimmy Song. He's a Bitcoin developer, educator, entrepreneur, and wizard.
I thought he was a singing artist.
He's an open source. You just did that. Okay.
I was waiting for that.
Sorry, Mr. Song. He's an open source contributor to many different Bitcoin projects. He's the author of Programming Bitcoin from O'Reilly, The Little Bitcoin Book, and Thank God for Bitcoin. Jimmy writes I'm going to call him Jim now, writes a weekly newsletter,
I call him Jay.
Bitcoin Tech Talk, and has a podcast, Bitcoin Fixes This. Jimmy, thanks for joining us on Cross Politic.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a fan of the show, and I love that you guys are asking these questions because that means that we're finally going to come into the mainstream. So there we go.
And he's appeared on shows like Cross Politic.
He don't listen to no Cross Politic. Why are you playing?
I don't know. He came out swinging when we got him on the line.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, all right, Jimmy, we've been dubbing this show as we've been prepping for it. This is Bitcoin for Dummies.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a little bit here and there. We had George Gilder on a while back, and we've tried to understand what he's talking about, but our brains are really small. And so
between the three of us, might get one brain.
So start out real slow, real basic for us. What is Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is digital currency. And the thing that makes Bitcoin different than, say, the US dollar, which is also digital currency, is that it is decentralized. So the way I like to describe it is decentralized digital currency. Okay. Now, we have decentralized currency like bars of gold, but it's physical. So that's decentralized physical currency, right? Anyone can go dig for it. There's no permission required by anybody. We also have centralized digital currency like the US dollar, but for your younger viewers, you can think of it like World of Warcraft gold. That is something that the Blizzard Corporation issues as part of their game World of Warcraft. Lots of other things like that, including airline miles and many other things, which are also digital. Yeah. But they're controlled by a central entity, and they're the only ones that are allowed to issue it. Okay. Bitcoin is both decentralized and digital, and that makes it very unique.
Who issues
that is something that we never had.
Who issues it?
Nobody. Well, so you can mine for it. So there's somebody that mines it. And they're called miners, just like gold has miners, right? They're the people that dig gold out of the ground. And there's a lot of analogies to be made there. But basically, you run mining equipment that's basically computers that are processing lots and lots of numbers to find it. So I'm told that for a gold miner, they go through something around 40 tons of dirt and rock to find 1 ounce of gold. Right. That costs roughly the cost of 1 ounce of gold, which is currently about $1,700 or so. So their cost basis for mining that ounce of gold is maybe like $1,650, and they make $50 on margin, something like that. Bitcoin is very similar. There are mining companies with a lot of mining equipment, and they mine not with dirt, but with numbers. They process as many numbers as they can. And when they find their nugget, then they broadcast it to the rest of the network, and then we now have sort of new Bitcoin that comes into existence. Currently, that is 6.25 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. It halves every 4 years, and for that reason, we know that there will be only 21 million ever. So it's not just digital and decentralized, but it's also perfectly scarce, something that we've never had ever in any currency before.
If Bitcoin is numbers, how can aren't numbers infinite?
Yeah. So your mental model of digital things is generally something like an MP3 file or something like that. You guys all probably remember Napster. You can just infinitely copy it, right? And it might be sort of like a strange concept that something digital can be decentralized, but it can be. And the way that's done is through a ledger. And a ledger is what your bank uses. It's almost exactly like it. When you deposit money, right, $500 into your bank, what they don't do is label a box with your name and put your $500 in it. That's not how it works. Right. They put the $500 in the vault and credit you plus $500 to your account. Right. And when you pay somebody and send a check to somebody, for example, they debit your account and credit the other account. That's how a ledger works. So it's a ledger is really just a bunch of transactions like that. Bitcoin also has a ledger, except instead of a bank's ledger, you have a ledger that everybody has a copy of, and this is called the blockchain. This is where this is a record of every transaction that's ever happened on Bitcoin. So it's not a small amount. It's about 300 gigabytes of data at this point because we got 12 years of history. But that has every single transaction. And any Bitcoin software can verify that no one's overdrawing their accounts, for example, creating new money. And it makes sure that there's a bunch of other rules as well that it complies to. But so the money essentially lives on this ledger. So if you tried, you can't sort of copy stuff. The number analogy that I made with mining is related to sort of how new Bitcoins come into existence on this ledger, but the actual accounting only takes place on the blockchain itself. Does that make sense?
Wait. The ledger sounds like there's a centralization there.
No.
Well, so that's the thing. Everyone has a copy. Every single person has a copy, and you verify for yourself. And the decentralized aspect is that I run the software and I get to check for myself. So with your bank, for example, you have no idea if it's solvent or not, right? And this was a big problem during the wildcat banking era and so on, where you had no idea if they lent out more money than they actually had in the vault. With Bitcoin, everyone that's running the software checks the ledger and makes sure that it balances, right? It's not in the negative or whatever. And everyone has a copy of that ledger. So you're essentially running the entire system that, say, a bank would run on your own computer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does to me.
Gabe got it.
I got the ledger. I understand.
You guys are speaking Texan.
No, he didn't say one thing. No.
Can we back up? Can we back up a little bit?
Just a little bit.
You and me at least.
Yeah. So, tell me what's confusing you, and I'll try to explain it as best I can.
Let's zoom way out first of all. And can you just give us a simple definition of what is money?
Yeah, so this is the thing that a lot of people realize once they get into Bitcoin is that they didn't really understand money. Money is basically three things in a classically economic sense. It's a store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account. And each of those things means something different. Store of value means that you can store value over time, and generally that means that money has to be pretty durable, and doesn't sort of waste away or something like that. That's why we don't use potatoes as money, for example.
Hey, are you knocking Idaho?
No. I'm sure somebody's used potatoes as money at some point. Right. Medium of exchange, which means that you can trade for things with it rather than bringing whatever you happen to produce. So
far you described potato chips. They can last for a long time. They have trading value.
All right.
And then, never mind. All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jimmy.
So it also needs to be because you're trading. It also needs to be highly divisible and fungible and recognizable. Meaning that if you can't divide it into enough pieces, then it's not going to be very easy to trade because you're going to want a little more precision. So you need it to be divisible. You need it to be recognizable. So you don't want want a metal that's very easy to fake or something like that, and they've had problems with this in the past where you had debased metal trading at par with real metal and so on, and you want it to be fungible. You want one piece to be the same as another, there are various commodities that are not like that, including something like diamonds, where the carat and cut might change things or whatever. So people don't use diamonds as a medium of exchange, for example. And finally, it's a unit of account. It's something that you use to measure everything else, and that's honestly where a lot of the shenanigans with the current monetary system actually happen. Is that because it's used as a unit of account, by inflating it, they're essentially able to control the economy to some degree.
So, Jimmy, I understand why gold is such a good standard, because not only is gold valuable in exchange, in its coinage or whatever in exchanging, but it also is intrinsically valuable because you can take that gold and make it into a gold chain.
It has values to it. Yeah.
It has its own value to it, and which is, and we used to have gold kind of be the standard for the dollar. We obviously disconnected the dollar from that, and so it seems like both the dollar and both Bitcoin are disconnected from something that has intrinsic value. Does that make sense? And we've disconnected it from a standard.
Is that true?
Well, so this is sort of like a different conception of value. So I come from sort of the Austrian economics school, and the Austrian economics school's theory of value is that all value is subjective, right? Like there's no such thing as intrinsic value per se. That's kind of like saying everybody in the world agrees that this thing is valuable for some reason. Like there's no way you can get everybody to agree on pretty much anything. So like the idea of intrinsic value doesn't really make sense. But that said, what you're pointing out is that gold may have had other uses before it became money. Now there's some suggestion that might not be the case, especially given that maybe it was used for gold teeth, but other than sort of modern, aeronautic, use cases or like electronics use cases, there actually aren't that many, right? Like people point out jewelry, but actually, if you study the history of gold, people used gold as jewelry because it was actually easy and convenient to pay. So people used to have links of gold chain, for example, so they could take off one link and pay people, and it was an easy way to make gold more tradable, in other words,
and transferable.
And it's very portable, and that's essentially why gold became money and became the standard from something like 1870 to 1910, was that it did have this scarcity, or it did have this utility, but the most important part was the scarcity, and that's something that gold's had throughout its history. Remarkably enough, over its 6,000-year history, the new gold mine has almost entirely been steady at about 2% a year, like going all the way back to ancient Egypt. You can look at the history of gold and realize like there was never really that big an influx of new gold, except for maybe a short time during the Spanish sort of taking over America and mining a lot of gold there. Other than like a few special times like that, gold's been remarkably scarce, and to this day, this is why gold is valued, because it's still scarce. There are lots of other monetary mediums like salt, wampums, glass beads, rye stones that are no longer money, because essentially people figured out how to produce all of those things in large quantities. So in a sense, like gold's value is subjective. So if, for example, we figured out a way to create lots of gold tomorrow, which is not out of the realm of question. There was, for example, an asteroid that NASA scientists found that had more gold in that one rock than all of the above ground gold in the world, right? Like, and if they could somehow efficiently go to that asteroid, or if it crashed to Earth or something, gold scarcity would go down, and probably its price as well. So does that make sense? It's about scarcity, not about intrinsic value.
Yeah, but I think that everybody who's used to working with money still has this mentality that the money is representative somehow in gold. And so, so more recently, I think that we're starting to see that,
or at least some kind of real value,
real tangible value,
because we wanted accountability in our money.
Right. So here's my question, I guess. Now, the more I understand money, what we have operating right now is really fiat money, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, basically the same thing. Since we already got fiat money operating, isn't it just fiat money operating on the other end too?
No, well, so all the other altcoins have some centralized single point of failure. So those, I think, would be fair to classify as fiat money. With Bitcoin, it's actually decentralized, and it's actually not an easy property to get. Decentralization in money, but it is very scarce. And you guys were talking about sort of having something tangible, and for older folks, that's certainly the case, that they associate scarcity with something tangible, right? Like, right. I'm being serious. Like for younger folks that actually know what digital scarcity is more like, and they're kind of used to what like a video game might consider scarce, and it's like a lot of older folks can't understand why you're paying like $500 for like a decal on a gun in Counter-Strike or something like that. Right. Like there is such a thing as digital scarcity. Now, centralized digital scarcity has lasted for a long time, including in fiat money. But decentralized digital scarcity didn't really come into existence until Satoshi Nakamoto invented it in 2008. Right. So what we have is this decentralized digital money that's actually scarce, and it has all of the utility of gold and more. Because with gold, you have to actually transport it, right? That actual act of transporting is like slows everything down. There's sunken treasure ships of yesteryear like had to carry the gold with them, and this is why there's like buried treasure period, because they had to carry it with them, otherwise they couldn't trade, and that was the problem. And in fact, that's actually the reason why a lot of gold turned into fiat money, is because trade over distance became so cumbersome. They used bills of exchange as a way to represent that gold, and then eventually it became fractional reserve banking, and like central banking after that, and all of this was to stimulate more trade, which in of itself is good, but it also gave the central bankers the power to print more money, which ends up like being an enormous moral hazard that's been taken advantage of by the ruling elite.
You just hit the music?
No, because okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, I know, but my brain's still fried. Okay, when we come back, Pastor Toby gets to ask his question.
I'm gonna ask a question,
and we're gonna have more with Jimmy Song. He's gonna sing some more songs about cryptocurrency for us next. My brain's fried. How do you have another question? You're supposed to be processing.
I'm lost after the.
Hi, I'm Robert Borton, CEO of Classical Conversations. Our most precious commodity is time. No one has ever lied on their deathbed wishing they had spent more time making money. They all wish they had spent more time creating a legacy. Our modern education system steals that legacy, steals that time from our children. That's why I'm passionate about homeschooling. That's why at Classical Conversations we want to give you more time to create that legacy, follow your passions, and glorify God. Visit classicalconversations.com for more information.
You didn't even let me count down.
No, because
3, 2.
I usually feel better when you let me count down.
There's gonna be a lot of counting coming up later. Don't worry.
Welcome back to Cross Politic. Another segment to break your brain on Bitcoin and blockchain.
Well, my Bitcoin's doing good. I have Bitcoin. I'm making money.
You don't know what it is.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Jimmy, are you a miner, like a Bitcoin miner?
What kind of question is it? You don't have to answer that, Jimmy.
I am not, and
you don't have to answer that. It's like that's some sort of racist foreigner question or something. Are you a miner? Is that what he said?
Let him finish.
I know there's like history of like Chinese people that came to Boise or something. So come on, let's calm down for a second. Well, all right, so let's first of all, I'm Korean, so just so you know.
I knew that, by the way. I didn't know that.
All right, so what we have with mining is kind of like the people that are good at it know how to run data centers, source energy cheaply, and all this other stuff. So it's kind of like gold mining, right? You're not going to gold mine unless you happen to be really good at those skills, which is, getting contracts for gold mines, right? Like getting the land rights or whatever.
Yeah.
The logistics around, digging and processing the dirt and all that stuff. So if you don't have expertise in that, that's not what you're going to go in. And this is one of the subtle things about Bitcoin or just hard money in general that a lot of people don't get, is that it incentivizes people to work at what they're good at, what provides value to other people, right? What provides value to the market instead of providing value to the money printer. And this is what we have in the current economy, is that a lot of people end up working jobs that are nearer to the money printer. So the best and the brightest in the world right now, right? Like the people that graduate from Harvard, Stanford, or MIT or whatever, where do they go for jobs? Well, they go into investment banking, not because they happen to be good at investment banking, but because that's where all the money is. That's where a lot of the money printing is happening. So, I don't mind Bitcoin, and that's a good thing. I do a lot of other things around Bitcoin that I happen to be good at, and that's how a free economy should work, where we can use the best gifts that God gave us for the betterment of others. To me, that is what it means to love other people, right? Love your neighbor, to put your best talents towards helping civilization, essentially.
So the question I had before the break was this. So it seems to me that, is this correct, that there has to be something of value in Bitcoin. And it seems to me that the thing that is of value is the security promise.
And the decentralization.
That's what it comes from.
The government can't toy with it. Okay.
That's what it is.
I'll let you finish.
So, I will. I have a question. But the security...
I'm working this out with you right now.
But that's the point. Is the security is the fact that it's entirely decentralized. Right. And so you've got everybody that wants to can check the ledger, can check to see what is there. And so there's a promise, at least, of security. As you noted, that's sort of always been the kind of one of the major challenges with currency is security. Not only does it need to be secure, but then you also need to be able to share it. You also need to be able to value things with it. But the security factor is is that correct? That the thing that people are saying, what we need is a more secure form of currency. And this was invented essentially as an offer of a more secure way of keeping value that can't be just strung around by one person or the government or whatever. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'm going to steal that, by the way, because that was such a good description. So basically, what you have is something that is really, really secure. And the thing is, like, the current system, the fiat system, is designed around securing it against theft of certain types. So if you hold gold bars in your house, then somebody can come in and rob you or something like that. But it also doesn't, protect you from theft in other ways, like inflation, right? Like with the government taking it away, or if they accuse you, if they don't like you politically, they can take it away and things like that. So Bitcoin is essentially something that secures you against all of those. So it's perfectly scarce, so no one can sort of inflate and like dilute your coins. It's also much more easily securable. So you guys are probably familiar with Executive Order 6102, 1933. Yeah, this is when FDR basically confiscated all of the gold. And he was able to do that because gold is a physical commodity. The nice thing about Bitcoin is that it's a digital commodity. It's actually like sort of a metaphysical thing. So you can memorize 12 words. These are what you would call seed words or something like that. And basically hold all your Bitcoin in those 12 words. And this has been used. So, I know people from Venezuela who are fleeing the Maduro regime. And, you got to imagine, like, if you're a refugee from a regime, like, you want to take all the value with you as possible. Yeah. But generally, those regimes make it very, very difficult. So what they do is they sell everything that they have and convert it to Bitcoin, memorize those 12 words or keep it on their phone or something that won't be confiscated, cross the border, and then sell the Bitcoin and start a new life. And that's something that really refugees haven't really had the chance to do. And this is something one of my co-authors to the book, Jordan Bush, he's a missionary in Uruguay, and he's most of his congregation is actually Venezuelan refugees. This is something that he talks about, is how much Bitcoin just sort of changes the game in all of these places where, monetary inflation is much greater than it is in the West. So really incredible technology, because you can secure it just in your brain, right? It becomes something more akin to a belief and less like a physical commodity. And for that reason, it's a lot easier to secure. They can't just sort of take it away from you like they can a physical commodity. They have to sort of almost torture you, kind of like a heretic or something, right. Or accuse you of heresy, right? Like that's the level of security you have around your Bitcoins.
So you talked about there is no inflation with Bitcoin then, right?
Yeah, well, so not all 21 million has been mined, but that's the sort of like upper limit because of the halving schedule. So the way it works is first 4 years, it was 50 Bitcoin per block every 10 minutes. And that went for 210,000 blocks, which is roughly about 4 years. And then the next one was next 4 years was 25 per block, and that was 210,000 blocks. So 50 plus 25. And then the next 4 years, it was 12 and a half. And now we're currently in the era of 6.25. So it halves each time. And if you add 50 plus 25 plus 12 and a half, 6.25, and so on, it goes asymptotically to 100. 100 times 210,000 is 21 million. And that's how many Bitcoin there will be. Of course, that's not to say that, you can't, it's very divisible. So one Bitcoin goes down to 8 decimal places, and the smallest unit is what we call 1 Satoshi. So you can buy a very small fraction of Bitcoin. I can send you like 1/10 of a penny of Bitcoin if I wanted to. So
please
that's
do.
What.
James, I'll take donations.
Please do.
I hope you're getting paid more than 1/10 of a penny. Sure.
Okay, so I guess you just made me ask more questions.
Yeah.
But I guess the question I'm asking, with the rise of Bitcoin right now, it seems like you have a way to protect for inflation since it's perfectly scarce. How do you protect against deflation with it rising right now?
Well, I mean, deflation in that sense is a very good thing because, as people lose their Bitcoins, right, and this has happened. There was a guy that threw out a hard drive with 7,000 Bitcoin in it, 8 years ago into a landfill, and that's probably never going to get recovered again. There are lots of coins like that. So in that sense, it's deflationary, or it will be eventually when it's at 21 million and people start losing their coins. But in a sense, that means that the rest of the network gets that value, and that's about the most fair thing you can do, honestly. If the money goes away, that means that your Bitcoins are more valuable, and deflation from an economic sense is actually very natural. Like from Austrian economics, I'm speaking. As you can see this in cell phones and computers and technology that rapidly improves, but you can also see it in all sorts of other things, like housing, for example. It's a lot cheaper to build now than it was, say, 100 years ago. There's like technology that comes along the way that makes things faster, easier, cheaper. So deflation is a natural state of the world. So there's nothing really to fear. And in fact, during 1870 to 1910, during the gold standard, we actually had mild deflation throughout all of the world, despite some central banks trying to print and so on. And that was some of the best per capita innovation that we ever had. And it was actually post-Fed and post-central banking standard that we started getting a lot of trouble, including world wars and so on.
So, Jimmy, the Bitcoin caps out at 21 million.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I think there was more pressure to print more dollars to get away from the gold standard. You already kind of hinted at it a little bit, but because gold was so limiting in its ability to provide dollars to everybody to kind of expand, the great American economy, right? Does that make sense?
Well, so that's sort of been the narrative that every politician gives, right? Is that, oh, there just aren't enough dollars to go around because there's not enough gold. Actually, what should be happening is that the value of gold should have gone up. And what they wanted to do was keep printing more money. In fact, the reason why Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102 was that he wanted to devalue dollars. So everyone had to turn in their gold for $20.67. A year later, he revalued gold to $35, right? This was their way of expanding the monetary supply. And after Nixon cut off the link to gold in 1971, they could do that sort of willy-nilly at any point. But that was the point. It's that really the propaganda is that there aren't enough dollars to go around. Really, it is we want to expand the money supply, and this fixed, scarce thing won't let us. So it's really sort of taking that power of money printing away from the government, what we call in Bitcoin the separation of money and state, and that will that limits government naturally because they can't deficit spend. For example, this is one of the biggest ways in which money gets printed. Is that if you have a budget of $4 trillion and you get $3 trillion in tax revenue, the extra $1 trillion has to come from somewhere. The Treasury sells, bonds, which we call treasuries. And if there aren't enough buyers, the central bank steps in and buys all of those bonds. And that's how more money comes into existence. So
one more question down this line.
One
more question down this line of arguing. If Bitcoin caps out at 21 million, isn't that kind of restrictive to helping the economy flourish? So kind of just following down that line.
Yeah. So that's sort of like the Keynesian argument. You need money to sluice through the economy and continue to flow. And this is what they call velocity of money needs to be high. That I think has been more or less debunked by Rothbard and Mises. So there are you can go read Austrian economics. The arguments get a little more technical, but essentially the argument comes down to it's not about money being spent. It's about money being spent wisely. Like Keynesians like aggregate statistics, like how much is being spent and so on. But if you're spending money digging a hole and filling it back up, that's one thing. If you're spending money making an electric car, that's another. And those two have very different effects on the economy. So what Bitcoin and any really hard money does is it causes people to want to create good products and services and a lot more discerning about what it is that they actually pay for. So right now you have overconsumption of almost everything, and you can see that just in people, right? Like there's a lot of overweight people. There's a lot of like zombie companies that are completely bloated and things like that. This is the effect of just way too much consumption, and it's consumption brought forward. It's not like it's resources we have right now. It's essentially saying, okay, we'll be in debt for the next 30 years, and we'll consume this thing right now. Any parent can tell you that's not really good for character, right? Like if you give them something and then make them pay it off versus like making them save and then go get the thing. Bitcoin is more of a savings technology, fiat money, and it is really a debt-based money. That's really helpful. That's really bad. So
one thing that you went over really quickly that I don't think I understand is the idea of it having the value of Bitcoin or
so it's having the production of Bitcoin. So
what does that mean?
During the first
go ahead.
So miners mine every 10 minutes, right?
Okay.
So right now, every 10 minutes, miners find about every 10 minutes, miners find that gold nugget, as the analogy that I made. And for finding that gold nugget, they get 6.25 Bitcoins. Okay, which is somewhere in the vicinity of $330,000 or something like that. So that's what they get every 10 minutes. And this is some miner around the world about every 10 minutes. And that's been happening, but every 210,000 blocks, that reward gets cut in half. So originally it was 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes that a miner would get rewarded for finding their gold nugget. Okay. After 4 years, it went from 50 to 25. So their reward halved from 50 to 25, then from 25 to 12.5, and then 12.5 to 6.5.
And this was just the design. The inventor of Bitcoin just designed it this way. Is that correct?
Well,
that's correct.
And part of it was because at first you didn't have a whole bunch of miners, right? Like you didn't have a whole bunch of people mining, and as you got more miners, dispersed the work. Is that correct too?
Yeah, and it's actually really clever. It keeps the time constant instead of like based on the amount of computing power. So the problem, finding the gold nugget actually becomes more and more difficult as more miners come online. So, but the time is always consistent to about 10 minutes, which is a really clever design for computer scientists like me. Is absolutely fascinating, and academics are studying it for that reason.
Now that sounds like the game of Warcraft to me, right? There's an algorithm built in, a timing algorithm that's built into the game to where you can only accomplish so much. Or like when you download one of the games on your phone where you pay money to play, you kind of I
don't know about that game.
You don't have enough kids, do you?
No. You're building there's games that you can play on your app where you're
make a list. Gabe needs more work.
Like a civilization. If you can pay more money to kind of speed up the building of that civilization.
Yeah.
Or you can kind of keep plugging away at a certain level. But there's an algorithm in there that's kind of built in that's also time and money.
So, there's definitely an algorithm in there. It's called the difficulty adjustment. So the mining gets more difficult as more miners come. But if miners drop out, then the difficulty gets easier. So, that's the whole idea, is that there's always sort of like this consistent 10-minute block being produced, and that's ultimately what secures Bitcoin and what secures the network and secures secures the money from inflation and so on.
So when are the 21 million Bitcoins going to be finalized? When is all that going to be captured?
So by 2140, every Bitcoin will have been mined, but there will still be incentive to mine, because miners don't only get the mining reward or new Bitcoin coming into the system. Anyone that's creating a transaction on the network actually includes a little bit of fee to incentivize miners to include their transaction into the ledger. So the miners are responsible not just for adding new Bitcoins onto the network, they're actually securing new transactions on into the blockchain with that. So what they do is they run through all these numbers, and I told you that it's kind of like the dirt and gold processing or whatever.
Yeah.
Once you find that ounce of gold, it's fairly easy or fairly inexpensive to check that it's actually gold. There are chemical tests and stuff that cost way less than, $1,650 or whatever it is that it took to actually go find that gold. So the nugget equivalent in Bitcoin is like that. So anyone, once they find the nugget, or what we in Bitcoin call proof of work, that's a technical term for it.
Right.
Anyone running the software can very easily check that they actually found it, and that it was found without nearly as much computing power. So it keeps securing the network and so on.
So I want to.
I'm going to jump in here quick and say, go ahead.
I just want to go back to you were talking about the missionary earlier, and the use that he said this is, sort of transforming refugees and mission field and so on. I assume that you think that Bitcoin is the future. And how is it the future, particularly for Christians in our day? We're getting canceled. We're getting kicked off of all the things.
Can't find a bank.
You can't find a bank. You can't find because you think abortion is murdering a baby, because you think a boy is a boy and only guys should marry girls and this kind of thing. I see that as you described this, the idea that you can function sort of free of the government. Walk that out for us. Why should Christians think that Bitcoin is the future, particularly for freedom and for living for Christ?
Yeah, so I work with the Human Rights Foundation on some things, and I'm a coder and I'm a Bitcoin expert, so this might seem a little strange, but Alex Gladstein of the Human Rights Foundation was my co-author in the Little Bitcoin book, and he brought me in to talk to a lot of human rights activists, and he said they really need to know about Bitcoin. I'm like, well, what am I going to add, right? I'm a computer programmer. Like, what am I going to add to them? And he's like, well, ask them about money. So I was talking to a bunch of them and like, okay, what's your human rights thing like? Well, usually the story goes they start a human rights thing in their country and the government doesn't like it, right? And they've raised enough money. But what ends up happening is that the government will seize their bank account and shut them down, right? Like financial access, financial cutoff is the very first bullet that the government of any country will give, and so they'll take their bank account away. So they could be protesters in Libya or Zimbabwe or Venezuela or whatever.
Sure.
They'll take that away, and then suddenly now they can't operate, right? And oftentimes they have plenty of donors,
right?
They have people in other countries that want to give them money. They just have no way to give it to the people that are actually doing the work.
Right.
And if you think about it from a Christian perspective, this is happening all over the world, right? Like, think about, I don't know how many missionaries you guys are supporting or whatever, but it is very difficult to get money to missionaries, right? Like, there's usually 7 different intermediaries, and you're not really sure how it's going to get to them. And for a lot of the people that are on the ground, the biggest form of oppression is actually monetary. It's not about being tortured. It's about taking away your bank account, taking your ability to actually transact with people.
And live,
for example, communist China right now, there's a social credit system. And if you don't meet a certain credit score, you can't buy a train ticket, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how much you guys know about the Uyghur massacre, but this is part of what's going on. This is going, as you guys have hinted, this is going to happen to Christians.
Right.
And it's already happening to Christians in different parts of the world. So having a store of value, having a way to transact that is outside of government control is enormously important, because it's the way in which you interact, you're able to live, really. And by having this hedge essentially against the current system, you can kind of, live off of that instead of living off of this, very fiat system where they control you in so many different ways.
Right. So I want to talk about this because the exchange is part of my problem with this. And it seems like that the government can regulate this if they wanted to in some way. So let's say that I got, $10,000 or 10,000 Bitcoin, whatever, a certain amount of Bitcoin, and I want to go and use that Bitcoin as a transaction. Can the government then somehow regulate how I turn that Bitcoin into a currency? So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I want to go out and buy cheeseburgers right now, I can't go and buy cheeseburgers with my Bitcoin. Right? There's no.
Well, you actually can. There are services that let you do that.
Does McDonald's know?
Well, but they sort of run on the current system, right? So there's
so we need
there's a Deribit or somebody that has a credit card that's linked to your Bitcoin. So if you want to use that, you can use the Visa network. I think Visa and MasterCard announced in the last week that they're integrating Bitcoin. Their obvious plan is to make Bitcoin a settlement currency, so you can do it. But that's still sort of easily regulatable because they're a single point of failure.
Right.
That said, there are ways to transfer Bitcoin directly. So if I wanted to send you some Bitcoin, there's no one that can really stop me. As long as I'm paying sufficient fees to incentivize miners and so on, a government can't step in. There's no central point of failure, right? It's peer-to-peer.
I got that part, yeah.
So, but if you want to exchange it for something centralized like the dollar, those are choke points. Those are single points of failure. So, what happens? What's being proposed in India right now, for example, is they want to ban Bitcoin. Now they could try to do that, but the way in which they do that from a practical standpoint is that they eliminate all of the exchanges, the places where you can convert your local currency. I think there it's rupees to Bitcoin or Bitcoin to rupees. But that's sort of like a gateway to the centralized system. So if you need that gateway, that's going to happen. That said, if the merchant is willing to take Bitcoin, and I think that day will come. Yeah. Then it's going to change the game.
Okay, see, Jimmy, that's right.
That makes sense.
So here's where I want to get at. Are you saying that we need to start figuring out how to operate strictly under a Bitcoin currency instead of making that currency exchange?
Yeah, and there are people that do this, right? They're all in on Bitcoin, and they operate their lives to Bitcoin. They've obviously done financially very well, but that's what they do. I mean, as long as like you're allowed on the current system, what they'll often do is like put it on their credit card or something and sell enough Bitcoin right before the credit card is due. That way they don't have that much like fiat risk. And that way, even if they can't get canceled or something, and the government accuses you of being a domestic terrorist or something and cuts off all your bank accounts, you can now you have this store of value that is completely separate from them, and that is a wonderful thing.
Yes, because right now I think what we're seeing is that if you're considered a health risk, what the government can do to you now is unlimited.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even have to be like a terrorist in any kind of way. It just be like you're risking other people's health, so we're going to completely shut you down.
No. If you're risking people's health, you are a domestic terrorist.
You're actually right.
You're not wearing your mask.
So I guess the hard part right now is trying to figure out how we start creating exchanges between each other through the actual currency and not through the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, and not just our current currency. That seems like a complete remake of the system.
Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, there are lots of software that sort of lets you do that. So if you want to take Bitcoin for your like web store or something, there's an open source project called BTC Pay. It's led by a guy in Japan. But basically, you run a server, and as long as you're connected to the internet, you could take payment in Bitcoin, and it works really well. It's pretty secure, and basically you can you ship the customer pays in Bitcoin. You ship them whatever good or service that you're selling, or perform the service for them, and it's sort of like a closed circular economy. And what we say in Bitcoin is that you can be your own bank, right? Like and you don't have to have this trusted third party in the middle that can sort of take things away or confiscate or censor or whatever.
Okay, last question here. This goes back to some of my line of reasoning. If there's 21 million Bitcoins that have been mined by 2040,
still there, huh?
Well, there's 7 billion people in the world. How does that 21 million help how can 700 billion people can't get access to that money?
Yeah, so each Bitcoin is divisible to 8 decimal places. So the actual basic unit is not 1 Bitcoin; it's actually 1 Satoshi. So there's actually 2.1 quadrillion Satoshi, which is plenty for 7 billion people. And in fact, there's a layer on top of Bitcoin, which I don't want to necessarily get into, called the Lightning Network, and it's divisible by a further 1,000. And at one point, like 1 millisatoshi, as we called it, it was actually like about the price of a grain of sand. So, that's how divisible it is. It's extremely divisible, and there's no reason to think that Bitcoin, can't be used for a very long time with a lot of people.
Bitcoin's been pretty unstable for a while. It'll go through its times where it's really unstable. How does that play into this being a good idea?
Yeah, really.
Yeah. So you're asking about volatility. So I'll give you 2 answers. So first answer is that you have to recognize what central banks are doing, right? Like if you're not the Fed, the U.S. central bank, pretty much every other central bank in the world, you have to keep sort of like a peg range on the dollar. So if your currency gets too high, then you're not able to import anything because everything is too expensive. If your currency gets too low, then you can't sell anything abroad because your goods are too expensive and so on too. Right. So to do this world trade, you have to keep it in a particular range. So essentially, what a central bank does is it manages that currency range by selling U.S. dollar reserves or buying back thus buying back their currency, or printing more of their money if it goes too far the other way. So that limits the currency fluctuation. But once in a while, you'll have these like what you would call black swan events where, the currency will blow up. So Switzerland had something like that maybe like 7 years ago, where it went from like $1.30 per franc or something like that to 80 cents, something to that effect. Like it dropped like overnight. And if you suppress if you have a central bank that sort of suppresses volatility, it'll look stable for a while, but you're just sort of like putting all of the volatility into sort of a major event, and that's generally the tendency. So Bitcoin does not have a central bank. Someone that's like making sure it's staying in a certain range. So, of course, it's going to be more volatile than these other things. The other answer that I'll give you is that, central banks generally have, de-risk every asset. That's kind of their job. They're bailing out every bank. They're bailing out every bondholder and everything else. And the way they do that is take out the risk. The thing that happens when you take out the risk is that you also take out the reward. You take out what investment professionals would call yield. And this is why you're seeing like interest rates drop basically to zero. And this is why you no longer get any interest from the bank, because they've de-risked everything, but they've also made it so that you get no reward whatsoever. So Bitcoin is a risky asset. I'll fully admit that. There's a lot of volatility and so on, and especially over the short term, it might go up and down a lot. I mean, it went up like $3,000 today, right? Like that's like 6 or 7%. That's not a stable asset, but that risk comes with a large reward, and that's what we've seen in Bitcoin. I think over the last 10 years, the average annual return is 200%. There's no asset like this at all in the entire market. Now, at a certain point, once the world sort of goes on a Bitcoin standard, if that day ever comes, then we'll be denominating things in Bitcoin instead. But in the meantime, we're still on the dollar standard. And the world has been on the dollar standard since about 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement. And that means that, that's the currency that everyone's going to see it in. But you have to remember, the dollar's been like losing purchasing power and everything else. The M2 money supply has expanded by 40% since this crisis started. That's not a small amount, and the CPI is a complete lie. It's got the hedonic adjustment index and everything else which is basically fudging numbers so that it always magically comes in at 2%. The real inflation rate has been more like 7% until the last year, in which case it's been like 30%. So you have to think about storing value over time. If you're keeping it in dollars, this is what Michael Saylor calls a melting ice cube. With Bitcoin, you can actually store your wealth, and it's going to be stored well, especially over a longer time horizon, like 5 years.
Man, Johnny, we're gonna have to
that was an education right there. That was like, my head is full.
Yes.
But I think I understand it a little bit better, like a little bit better.
Yeah. No.
And that was fantastic.
And we take 2 years.
That was.
And now we got to talk about all kinds of other currency next time. Hey, Johnny, how do we follow you on Twitter? I'm sorry. That's how fried my brain is right now.
You don't know who he's talking to.
Mr. Song.
Hey, Bobby. Really good.
Mr. Song, how can we follow you on Twitter?
My name on Twitter is @JimmySong. I don't know if you guys are on Clubhouse yet, but you guys are perfect for it. I'm there as Jimmy Song BTC. Okay. I'm also on Medium, Jimmy Song. My newsletter is jimmysong.substack.com. My website is programmingbitcoin.com. That was my first book it's a technical book for programmers if you want to know about the Bitcoin protocol. Also wrote 2 other books. The Little Bitcoin book, which is sort of like a very simple explainer of Bitcoin if you're interested in that, and Thank God for Bitcoin, which is a moral argument for Bitcoin from a Christian perspective.
Appreciate you, Jimmy. Thank you so much for taking time with us.
Yes. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until next week, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politics.
You think you should add buy Bitcoin to the end of that?
I was thinking about it, but I was going to say, go to the conference.
Buy Bitcoin. Yeah.
Go to the conference.
Go to South Dakota.
2020. God exposed America with a bunch of viral particles, a plague. God flicked and we buckled. Our political leaders shut down their states in fear. Our pastors abdicated the church as non-essential, and we have been scattered by petty, tyrannical resolutions and edicts into our homes or hiding our shame with masks. Businesses have been shut down by arbitrary non-essential labels. Strip clubs, pot shops, and abortion facilities remained open, while churches were threatened, regulated, and fined. First Amendment rights were trampled on as we Christians were arrested by despotic, unprincipled local governments. Citizens were harassed by unelected health districts, and communities were threatened in their houses by cops. This sounds like a third world country, a bad dream, but it is not. It is the new America. This America is ruled by fear. This America is ruled by opportunistic politicians who don't give a damn about you. This America breeds a compliant citizenry that cares more about their strip clubs and DoorDash deliveries, that cares more about their safety and their comforts, than the truth that Jesus is King of Kings and that our freedoms are protected by the Constitution. This America is worse than King George III's America. It's time to take a stand, but to stand requires courage, and courage requires repentance. What we need is reformation and revival in our churches, in our families, in our communities, in our businesses, and in our government. Every square inch needs the blood of Jesus. We need to seize this moment where all our sins, fears, and failures have been exposed by God through this plague and gather to sing psalms, to feast, and to get strengthened, to be encouraged, and equipped to lead America back to Jesus, who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Governor after governor instituted some sort of shutdown, ignoring your constitutional rights. There was one governor, one state, that did not buckle and join the crowd of governors driven by fear. Governor Christine Noem has stood strong through this pandemic. And so we are bringing our first annual Fight, Laugh, Feast rally to Rapid City, South Dakota, April 29th through May 1st. Join us in the land of the free and the home of the brave as we learn to love God, sing psalms, and defy tyrants.